Two oxen knelt beside me. One held the boy's feet.
What if Rex hands?
Tried to take a blood sample.
Instead, extracted only a brown, viscous matter.
As I was withdrawing the needle,
The boy began another bout of violent movements.
one of my orderlies
The one responsible for it all.
gave up trying to hold
I
it.
thought it would be safer if she braced him against the floor with her knees.
The boy jerked again.
I heard his left arm snap.
Tugging his both the radius and overgrown staff through his straight flesh.
Oh, the boy did cry out.
It didn't seem to notice. It was enough for the two orderlies to leap back and run from the room.
And I instinctively retreated several paces myself.
I am embarrassed to admit this. I have been a doctor for most of my adult life.
I was trained, we could even say, raised by the People's Liberation.
I've treated more than my fair share of combat injuries.
Faced my own death on more than one occasion.
And now? I was scared.
Truly scared of this frail child.
Boy began to twist in my direction.
His arm was completely free.
Flesh and muscle tore from one another until there was nothing except stuff.
His right arm outside the center left hand.
Dragged his body across the floor.
I hurried outside,
Locking the door behind me.
trying to compose myself, control my fear and shame.
My voice so cracked as I asked the villagers how the boy had been infected.
I shouted.
As much as from fear as frustration.
Who had been taking care of this child?
No answer. A young woman finally came forward.
Maybe his mother.
You could tell she had been crying for days.
Her eyes were dry and deeply red.
She explained that it had happened when the men's father was moon fishing.
A term that describes diving for the sunken treasures in the ruins of the Three Gorges Reservoir,
More than 1,100 abandoned villages.
Towns.
and even cities.
There was always the hope of recovering something valuable.
It was a very common practice in those days.
And also very illegal.
She explained to them they were not looting.
That it was their own village.
Oh, to shame, and they were just trying to recover some heirlooms from the house that hadn't been moved.
She repeated the point. I had interrupted with promises not to inform the police.
Finally explained the boy came up crying.
With a bite mark on his foot.
Didn't know what had happened.
The water had been too dark.
And muddy.
His father was never seen again.
I immediately reached for my phone and dialed the number of Dr. Guwin Quinn,
An old comrade from my army
who
days.
now worked at the Chongqing Medical Institute of Infectious Disease.
The Institute of Infectious and Parasitic Diseases, the first affiliated hospital.
Chongqing Medical University.
We exchanged pleasantries.
Discussing our health.
Our grandchildren.
It was only proper.
Then told him about the outbreak.
We tried to listen as he made some joke about the hygiene habits of hillbillies.
I tried to chuckle along.
I continued that the incident might be significant.
Almost reluctantly, he asked me what the symptoms were.
Told him everything.
The lights.
Fever.
The boy.
The arm.
His face suddenly stiffened.
Smile died.
He asked me to show him the infected.
I went back into the meeting hall and waved the phone's camera over to the patients.
He asked me to move the camera closer to some of the wounds themselves.
Well, I did so, and when I brought this phone screen back to my face, I noticed that his video image had been cut.
Stay where you are, he said.
Just a distant, removed voice now.
Take the names of all who have had contact with the infected. Restrain those already infected. If any have passed into coma, vacate the room and secure the exit.
His voice was flat,
Robotic.
as if he had rehearsed a speech or was reading from a script or something.
He asked,
Are you armed?
Why would I be, I asked.
He said he would get back to me.
All business again.
He said he had to make review calls and that he should expect support within several hours.
they were there in less than one.
50 men in Army Z-88 helicopters.
All of them wearing hazardous material suits.
They said they were from the Ministry of Health. Yeah, I don't know who they thought they were kidding.
With their bullying swag.
Their intimidating arrogance.
Even these backwater bumpkins could recognize the Guan Mu.
One Quan on Quan Boo.
The pre-war Ministry of State Security.
Their first priority was the meeting hall.
They took the patients out on stretchers.
Everyone was shackled.
We're not scared.
Next, they went for the boy.
He came out in a body bag.
His mother was wailing to see the rest of the villagers who frowned up for examinations.
Names were taken
Their blood drawn. One by one, they were stripped.
and photographed.
The last one to be exposed was a 30-year-old woman.
She had a thin, crooked body,
Face with 1,000 lines.
tiny feet that had been found when she was a child.
She was shaking her bloody fist at the doctors.
This is your punishment, she said! This is her man for menu!
She was referring to the city of ghosts whose temples and shrines were dedicated to the underworld.
Like old Dashi, it had just been another obstacle for China's next great leap forward.
It had been evacuated.
Then demolished and almost entirely drowned.
I'm not a superstitious person.
But I've never allowed myself to be hooked on the opiate of the people.
I'm a doctor.
A scientist.
I believe in only what I can see and touch.
And I've never seen Fang Du as anything but a cheap and kitschy tourist trap.
So, of course, this old crone's words had no effect on me.
Her tone, her anger,
She had witnessed enough calamity in her years upon this earth.
the warlords,
The Japanese.
The insane nightmare that was the Cultural Revolution.
she knew that another storm was coming.
Even if she didn't have the education to understand it.
My colleague, Dr. Quay, had understood all too well.
He even tried to warn me a few times.
It didn't give me enough time to call.
And maybe alert a few others before the Ministry of Health arrived.
It was something that he said.
A phrase that he hadn't used in a very long time.
Not since those minor border clashes with the Soviet Union.
That was back in 1969.
We were on an earthen bunker on our side of Yusuri.
Less than a half a mile from Chinvale River.
The Russians were preparing to retake the island.
They're not forced, they're a hammer our forces.
You and I are trying to extract shrapnel from a young soldier's belly.
Let's look at us.
Your test has been proved.
His blood and excrement were all over our down. Every 7 seconds, another rifle would hit. We would lean over the dying boy trying to shield his wound from falling earth.
Every 7 seconds, we'd be close enough to hear the whisper of SARS.
Closer. There were other voices too.
Rising from the pitch darkness on the other side of the river.
Desperate, angry voices that weren't supposed to be on our side of the river. We had 2 infantrymen stationed at the bunker's entrance.
One of them shouted,
Spetsnaz!
"Gonna fight him!"
More shots were heard now.
Ours and theirs, we really couldn't tell.
Another round hit.
Whose face was just centimeters from mine.
Sweat was pouring down his forehead.
Even in dim light on a paraffin lantern, you could tell that Goo's face was shaking pale.
He looked at the patient
And at the doorway,
and at me.
and said,
Don't worry. Everything's going to be all right.
Now, this is a man who has never said a positive thing in his life.
Goo was a warrior.
A neurotic curmudgeon.
If he had a headache,
It was a brain tumor.
it looked like brains.
This year's harvest was ruined.
This was his way of controlling the situation.
His lifelong philosophy for all was getting out ahead.
Now, when reality looked more dire than any of his fatalistic predictions,
He had no choice but to turn tail.
And charged in the opposite direction.
Don't worry. Everything's going to be all right.
For the first time,
Everything turned out as he predicted.
The Russians never crossed the river.
and they even managed to save their patient.
For years afterwards, I would tease him about what it took to pray out just a little ray of sunshine.
He would always reply that it would take a hell of a lot worse to get him to do it again.
Now we were old men.
Something worse was about to happen.
It was right after he asked me if I was armed.
no,
I said,
why should I be?
There was a brief silence.
I'm sure that other ears were listening.
Don't worry.
He said,
Everything's going to be all right.
That was when I realized that this was not an isolated outbreak.
I ended the call quickly and placed another to my daughter in Wayne South.
Her husband worked for China Telecom and spent at least 2 weeks of every month abroad.
I told her that she should accompany him the next time he left, and she should take my granddaughter with him.
I didn't have time to explain.
The signal was jammed.
Just as the first helicopter appeared.
The last thing I managed to say to her was,
Don't worry, everything is going to be all right.
Huang Jingshu was arrested by the MSS and incarcerated without formal charges. By the time he escaped, the outbreak had spread beyond China's borders.